All the characters in the story are over 18 years old. At the age of 20, I met John, who was a few years older than me. Probably, from the outside we looked like a strange couple. A tall, plump girl 2 heads taller than her skinny, but mobile beau. Nevertheless, this circumstance did not bother us at all. Our relationship was developing rapidly, and it seemed to me that things were getting closer to the wedding. But when our dates resulted in my pregnancy, John tried to persuade me to have an abortion. I strongly objected. He threatened to leave me. I did not want to part with him and urged him not to rush, to think, but I did not agree to an abortion either. As a result, John left. My marriage did not take place. But, as expected, 9 months later I had a boy, whom I named Michael, in honor of my wonderful father. My dad and mom had died by that time, and my 2 sisters had moved to other cities. All the trouble of raising my son fell on my shoulders. I raised my son alone because I thought it was necessary. The boy grew up sociable, smart, handsome, kind, mobile, in short, all in his father, who, unfortunately, was not with us. When Michael was 6 years old, trouble suddenly came. The car in which he was returning home was in a serious accident. Thanks to the doctors, Michael remained alive, but after receiving a severe spinal injury, he became disabled. At first, the doctors honestly tried to get him back on his feet, but soon they pronounced a verdict: hopeless, and in the future he was not actually treated. There was no point in staying in the hospital any longer. Tell me honestly, doctor, is my boy really hopeless? I asked the attending physician when Michael was discharged from the hospital. Honestly? The gray-haired doctor repeated, looking at me thoughtfully. According to statistics, every 6th person who has suffered a spinal injury dies in the first days and weeks after it. You mean? I interrupted him, startled. No, he interrupted me in his turn and, after a pause, said decisively, there is nothing more we can do to help him. Sorry, but of course. I began timidly, but the doctor stopped me with a gesture. Understand that your child's great desire will be crucial. You will have to put a lot of effort and show incredible perseverance in the fight for your boy's life, for his speedy return to his family and friends. I will not dissemble. You are in a very bad situation, but there is a chance to get out of it. Be prepared for long-term hardships. It may take many years before a small result appears. Before leaving, he gave me some books and advised me to follow their recommendations. I was very grateful to him, because our doctors are not always disposed to answer uncomfortable questions honestly and frankly. At that time, I still had no idea how serious everything was and what challenges awaited me in the future. I had a subconscious hope that Michael would lie down for a week or two, at least a month or two, get up and run as if nothing had happened. If only it were possible. After returning home, the problem started immediately. Such a natural need as a walk turned out to be a luxury for Michael. Then we lived on the 14th floor of a new building, the doors and stairs of which did not allow one person to take out a stroller. 2 men were needed, preferably strong ones. But where can I get them? I had to literally carry my son in my arms. It's also a good thing that Michael took after his puny father, and not me, the lady in the body. It was urgently necessary to find a new, more comfortable apartment, which fortunately was quickly found. The move was uneventful. The new apartment was smaller, but most importantly it was on the ground floor, and it was much more convenient to go outside with my son than at my previous place of residence. It was necessary, however, to slightly rebuild it to meet the needs of his son. When exchanging apartments, I even managed to earn a little money. This money was a gift of fate, as it was sorely lacking. Unfortunately, they all went to pay for the relocation and remodeling of a new apartment. To the credit of John, Michael's father, when he found out about our misfortune, he regularly sent me a small amount of money. Emotionally, at first I wanted to send them back, but after calmly reflecting, I decided not to return the money. Subsequently, they were very useful to us. Alas, after his son came of age, money transfers stopped. After the car accident, my son remained the same smart, handsome, kind, but he had no one to talk to, except sometimes on a walk. At first, I tried to bring the neighborhood kids, his peers, to him, but he, seeing only pity and sometimes disgust in their eyes, asked me not to bring anyone else to him. So his social circle was sharply narrowed, which made him look depressed. Therefore, when talking with my son, I always kept deliberately cheerful, fearing that he would become depressed, the worst enemy of a disabled person. In the new apartment, I slept in the same bed with my son, afraid to leave him unattended, washed him, since he could not wash himself. I didn't even know before how many problems a disabled person has. The fact is that spinal injury causes not only immobility and loss of sensitivity, but also affects the work of internal organs. But first of all, it was impossible to allow the appearance of pressure sores, that is, necrosis of soft tissues. Bed sores are insidious enemies of a disabled person with a spinal injury. They are dangerous because of the transience of their appearance and the severity of the consequences, which cause tens of thousands of disabled people to die every year. Having appeared in one place, pressure sores will limit the position of the body and contribute to their appearance in other places. Deep, long-lasting bed sores can lead to damage to nearby bones, that is, osteomyelitis. This and many other things had to be remembered and prevented day after day, month after month. I was helped by hope for the best and self-confidence. I firmly knew my son would get back on his feet sooner or later. For 11 long years, I have been teaching the child to be independent, to strive for knowledge and constant self-improvement. She brought up independence and activity in him, not allowing him to grow up a winner and a dependent. One day I noticed that my son was watching me with interest. At first I thought I'd imagined his interest. You never know what it might seem to an old woman who hasn't had a man for a long time. But after thinking about it, I realized that, firstly, my boy has grown up and has already turned into a young man and will soon become a man, and, secondly, if healthy children usually receive necessary and unnecessary information from peers on the street, from books or having overheard adult stories, then my son is practically deprived of such an opportunity. I answered all his questions in detail. She showed him how everything works for a woman. A few days later, I woke up to Michael's screams. Pulling back the blanket, I examined him as usual. I must have had a terrible dream. The next day I reread all the literature I could find. There was practically no information on the issue of interest. A few days later, on one of the long evenings, I was sitting on my son's bed, sewing up torn socks. Michael was watching a movie on TV. He turned his head to the wall. His eyes were moist. He sighed heavily. I realized that he feels disconnected from the society of healthy people and peers on the street. It is difficult for a healthy person to understand the full drama of the situation when a young, full-fledged guy cannot find a girlfriend simply because he does not leave home. And when he is taken out in a wheelchair into the yard, nothing changes fundamentally. After all, he can't invite a girl he likes to a disco, a movie, or a cafe. All that a healthy guy can do without difficulty is an insurmountable obstacle for a disabled person. Several months have passed. Nothing remarkable happened. I could feel that he was worried about something, but he didn't want to talk about it. Gradually, his son's mood began to deteriorate. He ate without appetite and became apathetic, and at times irritable. He reluctantly practiced therapeutic gymnastics. He developed a painful state of longing, depression, and hopeless despair. Soon the son completely stopped working on himself, became hardened. The conversation with him often began to end in a scandal. In the morning, he turned on the TV and sat in front of it all day, refusing to walk. Over the past 11 years, I have seen a lot of desperate people with disabilities and knew perfectly well what sad consequences depression can lead to. I was very worried, but I hoped that my son's upcoming birthday would help change the situation for the better. My son's birthday has come. He turned 18 years old. We were sitting at the table on my son's bed, and next to it on 2 stools were dishes and a bottle of red wine. I'm wearing my best dress. From the outside, it might seem that we were having fun, but in fact I felt that my son's fun was fake. He was obviously burdened by the conversation, but he didn't want to offend me and kept the conversation going. We drank red wine to improve his health and get well as soon as possible. Our conversation flowed unhurriedly. We exchanged meaningless phrases. "Michael, please tell me, what are you worried about lately?" I suddenly asked my son, "Why did you become so irritable?" "I'm not sure that girls will be interested in me," the guy answered thoughtfully, lowering his eyes. "They probably don't consider me a man." "It's not like that. I objected decisively. Understand courage in the feminine sense is, first of all, kindness, intelligence, and strength. It is not muscle strength that is important to women, but first of all the strength of the spirit. Nothing delights a woman more than a man's self-confidence and his ability to find a way out of any, even the most difficult situations. With such a man, she will feel protected. And women also like to have an optimistic companion next to them, not a pathetic winner. Will she be able to get satisfaction from intimacy with me? The son asked. I don't know anything and I don't know how. I'm afraid she's going to leave me. You're going to be fine, I said with feigned optimism. Will the girl be able to have children with me? I'm sure there won't be any problems here. Everything is working properly for you. Would a girl want to date a guy who could die of complications at any moment? How long have you been ill? No one knows that. There is only one thing left, to live every day as the last. After all, life is given to a person once, and it must be lived in such a way that there is no painful shame for the aimlessly lived years. All of us are not eternal on earth, and what kind of footprint we leave on it depends primarily on ourselves. The son fell silent in thought. Now I understand the questions that worry him more than bedsores, pains, and disorders. Apparently, Michael felt lost not only to society, but also of no interest to the girls. Such fears can eventually develop into neurosis. He needs a real hormonal release, under the influence of wine or sudden surging emotions, but I decided I needed to help my son with a girlfriend, and he had no one else besides me. We made love. Exhausted, I fell down next to my son, on whose face one could see delight and euphoria, and in his eyes there was a strange gleam. A few minutes later, I left him to take a shower. When I returned, my son was already sleeping peacefully, smiling sweetly in his sleep. I lay down next to him and thought about it. How could I ever have imagined that I would one day study with my own son? No, it was absolutely impossible and unthinkable. And so, the impossible happened and I'm not ashamed. Other people, of course, will say that it was necessary to find some woman. But how many women will agree to make love to a disabled person who can easily be physically harmed? What do they know about the life of a disabled person? Did they turn their own son over every 2 to 3 hours day and night, despite his loud cries of pain and desperate resistance? And if this is not done, then a bedsore will appear, the primary danger causing severe suffering and leading to death. Or they transferred a disabled person from a bed to a wheelchair and back several times every day, each time fearing to break his bones due to weak muscle tone. No, they don't dare to judge me. I am sure that only a loving woman, his mother, can solve his son's delicate problem. Conventional morality should recede here. Comforted by such thoughts, I fell asleep unnoticed. The next morning, the son himself enthusiastically began to practice therapeutic gymnastics, although yesterday he had to be forced to do it. I noticed in his eyes the same twinkle in his eyes yesterday. Doubts, fears, and fears left him. My son began to fight the disease, so zealously that I was only surprised. Michael explained that it's better to try to do something than to lie like a log and complain about life or feel sorry for yourself. I couldn't get enough of the change that had taken place, but at the same time I was afraid that his impulse might also suddenly fade away. I shouldn't have been afraid. It was only after a few months of suffering, labor, and sweat that modest results began to be produced. Gradually, the disease receded. Michael began to move his fingers slowly, and then his arms and legs. A few months later, with my help, he got out of bed and took a few unsteady steps on crutches on his own. Then he sat down on the bed, breathing heavily, but with a big smile on his face. He looked like the happiest man in the world. I smiled with him, proud of my boy. After the stormy events that took place on my son's birthday, I tormented myself, fearing that my son would take everything wrong and normal mother-son relations would be destroyed. My son may lock himself in on me and give up all attempts to improve his life. Like any mother, I wanted my son to have a girlfriend, but it seemed to me that there was no progress in relations with girls. Otherwise, the son has really achieved great success. He was already able to move around the room on his own, albeit with great difficulty and very slowly. Mom, I don't need any more help with making love, Michael suddenly announced. Why? I was surprised, looking at him anxiously, as I immediately thought about the depression that he had in the past. Firstly, I can already do a lot on my own, the son replied with a smile. And secondly, I met a healthy girl. Where? I was even more surprised. When did you get there? It happened a month ago, the son replied. Then you thought that you forgot to turn off the iron in the apartment and left me outside for a while. And I drove up to her in a wheelchair, and that's how we met. What's her name? Amanda. She lives in the second entrance. Why didn't you tell me anything? I asked him reproachfully. She's a modest girl, and I thought you wouldn't approve of my choice. Introduce me to her. Good. After talking frankly with my son, I found out that they were meeting in secret from me, since we lived on the ground floor. Her son talked about her with such rapture that it was obvious that he had fallen in love. I was afraid that due to his inexperience in communication, he perceived ordinary human signs of attention or pity from a girl as a manifestation of love. After all, my son has no experience in dealing with girls, and his mistake could lead to a dramatic development of events. But when I met his girlfriend with the symbolic name Amanda, I realized that I was wrong. The girl turned out to be pretty, modest, charming, beautiful, and energetic. After we met, they started dating without hiding me. Michael dreamed of learning to dance, and Amanda helped him in every possible way. Besides, she turned out to be a very patient and kind girl. The disease was rapidly receding. He could already walk with a stick. However, even if he could not walk, this circumstance would not have changed anything. They got married 6 months later. They had a perfectly healthy baby girl. I've never been as happy as I was that day, except for the day Michael was born. The doctor at the hospital was right. His great desire to get better and my perseverance, optimism, and hard work played a decisive role in my son's recovery. I hope my story will help you believe that even a very serious illness can be overcome. If you or someone close to you has a disease, do not give in to anxiety and uncertainty. You will need all the mental strength, a clear mind, and will to deal with the danger that has arisen. No matter how scary the diagnosis may seem to you, never give in to despair and do not give up. Fight to the last.